Dublin South FM, and it's reached that time of the month again where we have our financial expert, Breffney May of May Financial Planning, back on the show. Welcome to the show, Breffney.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Right, okay. A lot of big stuff has happened since you were last on.
Yes.
And I suppose the big one domestically was the movements in the central bank.
Yes.
Honohan.
Mr. Honohan has decided that he's going to walk away. He's going to retire. He has been hugely successful in what he's done. He's taken that bank from being a bank that just more or less made a few quid every year into a hugely profitable organisation. But it's time for him to move along. There are some people that are very, very good at handling and managing crises, and that's what he's managed to do. He had handed a very difficult set of circumstances with the collapse, and then taking that bank on to the next stage. I mean, he has done this country an enormous service. Some people may say he hasn't, but in my opinion, humble and all as it is, I always have an opinion about everything, I think he's done a super job. He's managed to rescue our banks, rescue the financial services, and rescue our international credibility. And managing a crisis is one thing. Winning the war, now you've got to win the peace, and that's a different process, and that's a different requirement. Actually, winning the next stage of it, and that may need another set of pair of hands. And sometimes a good leader knows when to walk off the stage, and he's walking off the stage at the right time. Things are getting to the point now where things are beginning to be good in this country. There is a bit of growth happening. The banks are beginning to be stabilised. Now it's time to move into the next part of our lives. And that takes somebody else's skill. It's a different kind of skill.
You're listening to The Business Eye here on Dublin South FM. And on today's show, we have Breffney May of May Financial Planning back on the show. Welcome back, Breffney.
And he walked off to Europe to sign us up.
And now, a lot of stuff has happened since you were last on. A lot of big stuff has happened since. Honohan and the central bank.
A very brave move. I think we may have all forgotten that once upon a time, not too long ago, the question was, which bin were you going to get your dinner out of, because the banks were about to collapse. And, we were very, very close to the wire. We were as close to the wire as happened in Cyprus when the banks closed. We were damn close to that. And little did we know, that man has managed to guide our ship through that very difficult waters and managed to get us to where we are today. And maybe it is time for him to step away. I think he's done a super job. And let's see where it goes next. I'd be interested to see who they bring in next. Hopefully, it's an outsider.
Because if you look at the figures, the central bank at 2.1 billion was the profit for last year, and over his 6 years, 8 billion.
Yes, unheard of from the central bank.
So he took over in what he called the crisis management phase.
Yes.
And now we're in the repair and consolidation phase, as he calls it. So,
that's managing these banks out of public ownership and back into private ownership. That's a whole new skill. And then regulating private entities and moving on to the next phase of this. Having fixed the banks and dealt with the problems that they created internally, that was an enormous task. And dealing with that, and dealing with people, because he was an outsider. He was an academic that came in from the outside, and he was dealing with people who are all buddies with each other. This is a small country. Everybody in the financial services business knows everybody else. I was at a meeting there on Wednesday last, organised by Davies and the Trusted Advisor Group, and it was astonishing walking into a room. There were very few faces in that room that I didn't recognise and know. And the same thing in banking, and at the level of senior management where decision makers are. They all know each other. And sometimes that's not a good idea, because you end up with the same speak happening all the time. And sometimes you need an outsider. And he was that outsider who said, this doesn't work, lads, change the game. And that took courage, and then to force it through. And because he had to, and remember, there's huge amount of politics involved, but also a vast amount of wealth was involved, and people were going to win and or lose their wealth based on his decisions. So I think he did a super job.
But why leave now? The hard work is done. He should be now. It should be the glory phase, maybe, where they bear the fruits of what he's sown. Do you think it's age? He is 66.
Different generals for different battles.
Yeah.
And the next stage is, let's move on into the next phase. Let's regulate the banks properly for a different climate. Let's deal with the new challenges that are coming along. growing a business, any business, is just as difficult and needs a different kind of skill set than rescuing a business. And he's rescued this country and rescued the financial services, and that took a lot of skill. Now it needs another face and another vision and another way of doing things. Because the central bank has proved itself to be one thing under his control, ownership, and that is independent. And it needs another independent voice. And it'll be interesting to see who takes over and who has the role. I'm not surprised he's gone. 66, that's not retiring. He's gone off to do something else. Mm-hmm. We can talk about that later, but retirement at 66, don't believe that.
Right.
Because I don't know what retirement is.
He said as well that he called a very interesting thing. He said he called Trichet a friend of Ireland. I suppose Trichet's been always looked as the bête noire in the whole scenario, but he said he was a friend of Ireland, and he's more confident now because of that.
Well, Trichet was the man who put the package together to rescue the banks that gave them the money, and he could have said no. Mm-hmm. And we got the deal. And obviously Honan has had a very close relationship with him, and he gives a different vision. I know he's the bogeyman. He's always been painted as the bogeyman, the man who told us, do this or else. But the Greeks are in an awkward set of circumstances at the moment, and Mr. Schäuble from Germany isn't being too nice to his opposite number in Greece at the moment. He's saying either put it up or shut up, and he's putting it up to the Greeks to decide which way they want to which game they want to play in. They want to play with us, or they want to play with somebody else, and he's not putting a tooth in it. And we were the Lehman Brothers of Europe at the time, when Anglo-Irish Bank collapsed, and they were linked into all the banks in Europe. Something had to happen. They had to be supported. Otherwise, they were going to pull not only the Irish banks down, but they would pull all the European banks down one after another. That's how integrated into the system they were. I mean, the question that was asked at the time of the crash happened in Ireland. Did anybody not notice that these banks were into everybody else, and that everybody else was as vulnerable? And it was that close. Mm-hmm. And if Anglo had gone down, or Bank of Ireland or AIB, any one of our banks had gone down, you would have pulled the rest down, just as it happened in the US. And the decision was made, we're not going to allow that to happen. Tough and all as it was, sometimes politicians are hard of hearing. And Mr. Trichet has been painted with, as being the villain of the piece. But we also have to remember, this is a small little country. Bristol has more people living in it and in its environs that live on this rock. We are a tiny little people on the edge of Europe. Yet we were our banks were borrowing more money from other banks to run our economy and grow our industries than any other banks in Europe were. And that left the whole of Europe vulnerable. And, they needed a bit of tough talking. And maybe we didn't like it. And we had to take some tough medicine. But you always have to find a villain. We're good at looking for them.
Yeah, the blame game. But just looking at the Greek situation now, I mean, we've always been talking about a Lehman's Mark II. Do you like Germany? I mean, we've had a so-called saber rattling going on, and Mexican standoffs, and whatever term you want to say about it. But it does look like. Do you think Germany, and when I talk about Europe, but Germany primarily, they're prepared for a Greek exit?
Well, I don't just think Germany is prepared for a Greek exit. I think Europe is getting prepared for a Greek exit.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to remember that countries like Ireland and Portugal and Spain had enormous problems when the crash hit. It hit us and hit them just as bad as it hit the Greeks. We all moved. We all tried to recover our economies. I mean, remember, there wasn't a pane of glass broken in this country. There wasn't a stone thrown. And yet we've lost massive number of people out of our economy. People living abroad. I mean, the real price of this country. I know we all pay in the debt, house prices have collapsed, we're all in negative equity and so on. But there is another price that's been paid. That's the empty beds and the empty chairs in households all over this country. I'm one of them. My son's abroad. I was watching television at the weekend, and then you had your man from Kerry, Mr. Football from Kerry, very upset that his daughter's gone off to Abu Dhabi. I mean, that is an enormous price.
This is Pat Spillane, isn't it?
Pat Spillane.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had to pay an enormous price, but we've paid it to get our economy back on track and to give the next generation a future. I was fortunate. I left school in 1969. None of the guys I went to school with ever left. We were very, very lucky. But the year before that, they all left. And the year following, half of them left. And the following year, when the crowd had left in 71, they all left. So we were unique. Immigration is an enormous thing we had to pay. But we did it. The Spaniards are paying the price for it. The Portuguese are paying the price for this. Latvians and Lithuanians had to pay the price for this to recover their economies after the crash. The Greeks have done nothing. You know, at the end of the day, well, that's the way it's been put to us, that they haven't actually moved to recover their economy and start increasing their taxes. And if you're not going to do that, hey, you know, something's got to give.
So, Griffin, you go with the put up and shut up?
Not necessarily. I'm saying play the game.
Yeah, play the game, okay.
Play the game. You know, we're in this business. We've had to put up with an awful lot of things. The Greeks are asking us to take a tax write down on our debt to them. We lent them the equivalent of our lingus. Are we going to give it away? That's not going to happen. I mean, should that happen? Should we, having been through what we've been through, just put a pen through our lingus and write it off? I don't think so. I think they've, you know, if they leave, it's going to be, nobody wants them to go. But if they leave, they do it themselves.
Now, okay, since we're on world European political issues, we could talk about the Greek exit, and now we had a Tory majority take over in Britain. Quite a shock, to tell you the truth. I think the odds in it was 1 is to. There was a 5% chance of it happening, according to the bookmakers. So, I mean, the fact that it happened was we've got the silent Tory vote that came out, but
shy Tories.
The shy Tories, but it brings a referendum back on the agenda again.
Yes.
The Brexit, from the Brexit to the Brexit. Is it a runner?
Well, it gives Mr Cameron a majority, and now he can go in and negotiate with Europe and get a deal and sell it to his Conservatives.
Yeah.
And that puts an end to it. They're either in or out. And it puts an end to this.
But for Ireland, this is huge.
Absolutely.
This is huge for us.
Absolutely.
Our biggest trading partner.
But it's also massive for the British people as well. It is absolutely enormous. Their economy is inextricably linked to ours and to Europe's. And the implications of it, I mean, just very simply, you can hop in the car and head north, and you're in Belfast in 90 minutes from here. You know, that's not going to happen anymore if they leave. You've got to go through your customs. They're all back. I mean, the implications, even for a company, take the likes of Lidl. Lidl have moved absolutely across Europe from Germany. In every town, in every country, they are across borders. Why? Because it works. Because you can move goods from the southern part of Europe to the northern part of Europe without borders at all. If Britain leaves, Lidl can't do that. That's just one simple example. It's an enormous risk that they're taking. The other thing that's happening as well is the Financial Services Centre in London, which is what they pride themselves on, which is their real generator of revenue for themselves. They're now looking for licences for our Financial Services Centre in Dublin, and are looking for the possibilities of headquartering in Dublin. They don't want to leave Europe. They don't want to be outside the European Union. That's an enormous market for them. How long do you think it'll take as the election comes closer before more and more British banks and financial institutions and trading houses start to set up shop in Dublin? They're already doing it. They're already looking for licences. More and more are going to come here. At the end of the day, the Scots had an opportunity to decide on their future, to leave the Union. And when it came down to it, at the end of the day, it came down to pounds, shillings and pence. Was it going to be good for them economically? And that was the one that stopped them in their tracks. Now, they've spoken in the last election and wiped Labour out in Scotland and wiped the Tories out. They've now got a voice, and they've now found it as the Scottish people. I'm not sure that Britain will leave. I think when it comes down to it, and it's a reasoned debate, I think you're going to find that they will probably want to stay in. But it will finish this question once and for all: is Britain in or out? Mm-hmm. But I wish him success. Mm-hmm. If he wants to renegotiate it, and this Greek problem going on, good luck. I will admire his negotiating skills from a distance.
All right, turning to domestic matters. And we were on the banks and variable rates. That's still very much in the news. And the government, before this election, they really want to cut deals on this. So we saw AIB, surprisingly, for you, came out, and they cut variable rates for new and existing customers.
Yes.
TSB and Bank of Ireland cut it for new customers, but not for existing.
Yeah.
So
and they're in the business, parent TSB and the banks. There is a real market now for mortgages again, so you're getting competition on the market. But you have to remember at the end of the day, I'm not saying that I'm surprised that AIB came out and did it, but they were under enormous pressure. And to hear the politicians are talking about bringing legislation in that they will actually start controlling interest rates in banks and telling banks how much their variable interest rates are. You know, which bank wants to come into a country and set up a shop in Ireland where tomorrow morning the government can say to you, sorry, we're going to make you unprofitable tomorrow. Bye-bye, here's your interest rates, cut them by 2%. That's no place for politicians. There's no banks going to be in here. We own these banks. We have to sell them. We poured millions into these banks. They're our banks. And I'm sorry for people who've got variable interest rates that they're stuck there. That's market. And these banks have to become profitable. They have to make money somewhere. Otherwise, we'll be stuck labouring with them for the next 25 or 30 years. Hope not.
The only way we're going to bring these down variable, it's not going to, government intervention is going to do it. It's going to be competition coming in from outside, because we've got the highest variable rate in Europe. That has to be attractive for outside banks.
Absolutely, of course it is. But you have to have a stable economy that's growing as well, and that's what we're beginning to get at the moment. And another bank coming into the market will change the game.
Much like the Bank of Scotland at that time.
Yes.
A game changer.
Do you remember them?
Yeah.
They left.
A little bit too enthusiastic maybe, but still, it changed the market. That's all it takes.
And once you get a viable operation going in a viable market, and once you've got transferability of mortgages, which is what we don't have, then you'll see action on interest rates, but not beforehand. But politicians in the middle of it telling banks what interest rates they should charge, I don't think so.
I mean, basically Michael Noonan, whatever. I know we're pre-election, so it's
politics.
It's hot air, really. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it. But still, just to say, for a person to just put it in context, a person on a mortgage of 200 grand is on a variable is paying more than 6 grand a year. And in Dublin, I could tell you could multiply that by 2 because you're talking about mortgages of 400 grand.
Yeah.
So that's a sizable.
It is hugely painful. And I do feel sorry for them. Anybody on a tracker rate is laughing. But that can change. Interest rates are going to go up in Europe. It is as night follows day. They will go up once the quantitative easing is out of the way. Interest rates will go back up again.
I think we can safely say for the next 18 months we're going to stay pretty much at rock bottom levels, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And once this election's out of the way, then you're going to see different things happening. But if politicians start interfering in interest rates, that is going to close the Irish market to other banks and other institutions coming in here.
Not really a runner, I think.
I don't think so.
No,
nice
not
piece
at all.
of politics, but don't think it's going to.
Yeah. Okay, retirement planning.
I was listening to Alan Lawler there talking about on the previous show, and making connections as well on the ad break before we came on air. Alan was talking about retirement planning, and he was talking about the mechanics of it. Now, as a financial planner, my job is basically to help people to live the life that they want for themselves and their families now and in the future without the fear of running out of money. And I'm not just talking about retirement planning. Planning a retirement is a normal, logical thing. And it's what kind of life you're going to have on the other side of it. The making connections was very interesting because I've been reading up around this and there's lots of papers about what the impact of retirement on people. And one of the things that comes across enormously is the changes that people go through when they retire, when they stop working and they finish work. Loneliness, lack of identity, lack of purpose.
Huge change.
The gender roles change. Impacts on families, strains at home. I mean, he's been out of work all day or she's been out of work all day and suddenly they come back and they're living in each other's ear again, and that causes its own different strains and so on. So when people start thinking about retirement and planning for retirement, what's it going to look like? What kind of life do you really want for yourself and your family? What are you actually going to be doing when you don't have to work every day of the week? And this idea and the concept of, Mr. Honan walking off the stage to retire, he's gone off to do something else. He's not gone home to watch the grass grow and play a lot of golf.
Well, a man with an active mind like that, I think he has to be engaged all the time, yeah.
And the concept of being retired at 55, I just find it absolutely bonkers. Because you're going to be around for 30 years. And that's an awful lot of time to fill doing what?
And the mind is a muscle, you've got to work it out.
Absolutely. So planning for it. I mean, if you're self-employed and you're running your own business, how do you sell your business? How do you let it go? Alan was talking about the options and the choices that are open to you in terms of retirement relief scheme and so on. But how do you walk away from business? How do you make sure that you've got enough left over to take care of whatever this thing called retirement is? Because most of the people I know who run, own and control businesses don't ever see themselves stopping. No one thinks, Breffney, I'll go mad if we retire. And it's that aspect that I spend a lot of time talking to people about, making sure that they're putting enough away and using the resources that they've got to fund for this thing. And I don't call it retirement, I call it, being financially independent, having the choice to ease down on the work that you do, or ease back on it, or walk away. But planning that and starting to think about it. And the time to think about it is not when you're 60. It's time to start thinking about it when you're 50. What is it going to look like? What do you really want to do with yourself? Because, as I say to my clients, on the day that you retire, you have become 18 again, with a big difference. You've now got money. When you're 18, you hadn't a bean.
And hopefully more sense than when you were 18.
Well, possibly. And I don't know. But it's making sure that the resources are there.
Okay, well then let's be practical about it then, because I mean you do financial planning for people,
yes.
But I mean you have to have practical advice for people. What do they do? I mean, do they take a part-time job in something that they find interesting?
In some cases they do, yes. In some cases they start and sell their businesses to their families and they work on it on a part-time basis and stay involved in it. They also get involved in mentoring people. And there's nothing wrong with working on a part-time basis. The biggest, most sought-after group workforce in France is the grey crowd, the people over 60, because they don't want to work 24 hours a day. They don't want to work 7 days a week, or 2 or 3 days a week, because they're going back for camaraderie. They're going back for the support and the social
sense
support.
of connection.
And what they want. And it's giving them a sense of purpose. Why should suddenly somebody who's been at the height of their ability, having spent 30 or 40 years in the business, knowing it backwards, suddenly just walk off into the dark?
So let's say take the example of a teacher, teacher that
yes.
was passionate about it, just a good teacher. Then for them you suggested maybe they could teach 2 hours a day or something. Or,
they can find some other way of using that skill in another way.
Yeah.
And it may not be that they're actually, paid employment is one thing, but finding something else that you can do that you absolutely love and planning that. I know people who walked away from the civil service and walked away from perfectly good jobs as teachers and so on, just because there was a cheque sitting on the table for 125 grand, and they walked away at 55 and then realised 18 months later they'd made the biggest mistakes of their lives. That
no
is
planning.
the saddest thing I've ever heard.
And at a young age.
Yes, and still fit and healthy and still wanting to do something and for not feeling fulfilled and thinking that they came home, their wives are stay-at-home wives, and what are they going to get involved in? What kind of life they're going to do? And suddenly walking in on top of this woman and saying, hey, now we're going to do this. No, we're not.
So develop hobbies would be an obvious
something.
thing. If you're going to pick up certain interests.
Because we're going to be living an awful lot longer. And we are. And please God, if your health is with you and it's staying and your health is good, you're going to be around for 30 years. And it's 30 years of what? And it's that what question that I'm interested in. And how do you pay for it? Where's the money going to come from? Big problem with people who retire, who've been involved in business, is identity. Who are you? Today I'm Breffney Maid, a financial planner. Tomorrow I'm Breffney and I am a what?
Do you think that in that instance, did you think their identity was too wrapped up in their business?
Most people are.
Yeah.
Most people are. And it's, what does that life going to live for you? What are you going to be doing when you're not working? And how much is it going to cost you? Oh, we'd love to travel. Yeah, fine. That's grand. Every month? Is there something else involved? Oh, I get engaged with my kids. Your kids are off living their own lives. What is that going to be for you? And how's that life going to be lived for you? That's what and funding it is what it's about. And, as Alan was saying earlier, the different choices and options open in relation to all the tools that are out there, the pensions for directors, people self-employed, people running and working in PAYE, working in civil service, topping up that. But finding out what it is that you want to do. The real thinking starts coming in terms of what is that vision of retirement that you want. For some people, finishing work in one job and finishing work, and I would call it finishing work, not retiring, finishing one life is absolute complete liberation to go and do what they've always wanted to do. And if you've got the resources to do it and you've put them away, and I'm very conscious that somebody who's coming into their 50s, if they've had children in their 20s, they're now at the most expensive time of their lives because they've got third level education and that's a real cost now. And then you've got weddings following on somewhere behind that. And if you want to help your kids buy houses or property, That's a real cost. So somewhere in the middle of that has to come. What about mum and dad? What about retiring and pension? And that is an enormous problem. But my industry is wonderful. It'll talk about pensions and savings and investments and so on. The other stuff's a hell of a lot more important.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Are they going to deliver what you're looking for? And that's the area that financial planners get involved in.
Yeah.
And one of the things I would say to anybody who's thinking in this area, if you're going to do this, talk to a financial advisor. And by the way, be prepared to pay for it. Be prepared to pay for the advice. Then he doesn't have to sell you something. Then you can get the independent advice that you're looking for and help you to achieve what you want in life. That's what we do. That's what our business is built upon.
So, Breffney, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, as
Thank
always. Look forward to having you back next month.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll have more interesting stuff to talk about then.
Well, the change is happening all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
Look
Okay,
forward to it.
that's it from this week's show. I'd like to thank our guests. In the first part of the show, we had Neil Sisson of linecanvas.com. We had Alan Lawler of Wallace and O'Donoghue Accountants. We had Paul Doyle of Ology Coaching. We had on about a Pareto Pencil. And we had Breffney May of May Financial Planning. My name is Padraig Marin. Stay tuned and have a good week.